What inspired you to write this beautiful book?
Well, a deep calling of God upon my life. Watching a continent disintegrate before my very eyes, and watching the world go by like nothing was happening. And then I got that, really, everything seemed to occur how it occurred, like no one cared about it, because the voices of Africa had been silenced. And I got that I had something to say, and therefore I needed to rise up from the ashes, from the ground where I had buried myself. No one knew who I was. No one knew my identity. I had to get up and speak on the behalf of Africa and the African people in the diaspora around the world.
It almost seems as if, with the responsibility of being a descendant of the great Shaka of the Zulus, you would have a responsibility to speak out. Now let's talk about some of the things that are worth speaking out on. The world has kind of neglected Africa. Recently, there's so little that is being said about Africa. And so we need to silence the silence.
Exactly.
Is that the way you put it in the book? Silence the silence. In other words, our voices must be heard. Now, what are we talking about? First of all, we're talking about the richest continent on the planet. Yet, our people are found begging. Explain that.
Yes. So, when you look at my book title, Talakata, The Tears of Africa, first of all, what hits you is the pictures of children in poverty. There's death and dying. There's a soldier in a casket. That is my uncle, General Chris Tembo, the grandson of Shaka Zulu. When he was the last one in my family to die before my very eyes, I realized something was missing. I needed to step up and tell the world who we were, what was happening to Africa, and what we wanted to share with the world.
You know, in the library of the Marcus Garvey Institute, we have the works of Walter Rodney, who talked about how Europe underdeveloped Africa. Now, when we hear about Africa, we often hear about diamonds coming from Africa and oil and gold coming from Africa. There's a lot of digging and fishing and so forth going on. Well, why is there so much poverty with so much work going on?
Exactly. So I got that totally, when I looked at my own continent and I observed all of that, I'm like, first of all, I am doing my master's degree at Roosevelt University. And even there, when we were studying about the global issues in the world, we discovered that Africa, for instance, Zambia, my country, Zambia produces one of the best, finest copper ore in the world. That mineral is so rich, it's beautiful. It's being traded on the London Metal Exchange, and the Zambian people, the Zambian country, don't even partake of that market. They're not even part of the market. So how can you call me a poor person, and yet at the same time you're in my country digging up the copper ore, selling it to the world, and copper is on demand because with the digital era, it's one of the highest demand because technology depends on copper, the copper ore. And Zambia is supplying the world with copper ore. But how come the African people are not part of it? And here I am. I have a non-profit organization with children on the streets of Africa, cold and hungry, whose fathers died in the mines, digging the gold and silver and the copper that the Western countries actually accumulating and shipping to Europe, London Metal Exchange, selling it. The children are dying. They're starving. Their fathers are dying in the mines. They're dying of AIDS. No one talks about it, and they're ignored. I figured it was about time to have an Indaba. And Indaba is part of my name. Zindaba is plural. It means many conversations. Indaba is single. One conversation. What I'm having with him today, this is an Indaba. We're having an Indaba. It will take many Indabas, these stories being shared, being highlighted into the world, and asking the world what is wrong with this picture, because
now,
something
white
is
folks,
very wrong.
They had an Indaba too, right?
They had
around
an Indaba,
1884. Tell us about that Indaba.
Right. So my book begins at the beginning, 1884, in Berlin, Germany. They had an Indaba. It's a conference that they held together. All the superpowers at that time convened in Germany.
Were these Africans?
They did not include Shaka Zulu or the African kings and the chiefs of Africa from the African continent on matters pertaining to African people. The European people convened in Germany and had an Zindaba discussing how they can bring civilization to Africa and how they can come into Africa and divide it civilly. Like, oh, we have to be civil, we don't have to kill each other. How can we do that? So, Britain, but John Cecil Rhodes, the guy representing Britain, drew a line from Cape to Cairo, a straight line, straight up across the continent of Africa, from the south, Cape, all the way north, straight line. The land east of that line came under British rule, and that's how he selected that land for Britain. So all those countries that came under British rule to this very day speak English because we became colonized by the British. The French picked up the Francophone. All these countries up in the western part of Africa that came under French rule, they speak French to this day because the French colonized them. The Belgium came in, they took their piece. The Portuguese came and picked up Angola on the west side of Africa and Mozambique on the east side of southern Africa. And then the base, down at the bottom, the Dutch maintained their grip on the southern coast of South Africa. So they held power over there. But the whole of Africa was now dissected and divided, demarcated, and the British and all the Western countries, the British, the French, they divided up Africa. They left out a critical component to that puzzle. Shaka Zulu, my grandfather, and all the other kings were not part of that. So when they came to the coast of Africa, they started fighting with Shaka Zulu because he was like, how can you come into my land and take away my land? So they got him assassinated. When you assassinate a leader, when you strike the shepherd, the sheep will scatter. They had Shaka Zulu assassinated. After him came all the kings that they haven't told you before. So in my book, from Shaka Zulu, I come down with all the kings to my present day, my brother in Chifumpamba in Lundazi. So I tracked down that line of heritage.
It's going to be very important that you have this book in your library because it has all of this fantastic information, because we get a version of what's going on that is not quite accurate. In fact, today, while we know that there's been many U.S. companies that have been in Africa and were in South Africa that supported apartheid directly and indirectly, today we have something like 20 million Chinese in Africa doing business in Africa. Is there a chance of a technological transfer with the Chinese? Will they be any different than the Europeans?
Well, what I write about in my book is this. I make a very, very clear distinction. What used to be colonialism is today globalization. There's no difference. What we used to have as the imperialists, the British, today we have Chinese. And these people are in there, they're in it for themselves. I don't think they even have Africa's best interests at heart at all. And that's why I wrote this book. I'm like, Africa, we need to wake up. Somebody wants what we have. We have something here to offer. What we need to do is get ourselves organized, take a look at what do we have. Someone has told us that we are poor people, but really, are we the poorest people in this world? I don't think so. We are the richest people. We have the natural resources that no continent in the world has, what Africa has today. But what's missing is the Africans coming together with the African American brothers. When I say Africa, I'm not just talking about the African people on the continent. I'm talking about the intelligent grain, the intelligent brain grain that's been growing elsewhere out there in the world, that is of African descent. And this work and this attention about Africa is calling to us together, reconnected, reunited. We can come up with solutions that are best for Africa. And the time is now, because the world is moving ahead. And it cannot leave Africa behind, because we have the technology to reconnect. We have the technology to have a say-so in the matter. And we can do it together.
We have been having many leaders like the Honorable Marcus Garvey, El-Haj Malik El-Shabazz, Malcolm X, Rabi Ben Ami. I mean, I could go on naming many men and women who knew it was important for us to reconnect with our motherland. Not only because it was the richest continent on earth, feeding the industries of everybody else, making everybody else wealthy while we were getting poorer and poorer. And then we had the nerve, some of us, to say, I haven't lost anything in Africa. You lost your mind in Africa. You lost your language in Africa. You lost your dignity in Africa. And only by uniting with our brothers and sisters on the continent can we get it back.